Okay, this is where we left off last time, where we drew the chameleons and then we put their pupil looking at each other. And I talked to you about how where you put the pupil can kind of start to tell you what the chameleon's thinking. The other part two, is that when you draw two chameleons, it's the start of a story. Anytime any artist draws two creatures in the same picture, there's some kind of interaction, whether they're watching each other and also how you position their body. But a story is starting to be told. So I drew these three. I was showing you before you could do your chameleon on a paper sideways, but certainly you can do it on your paper tall, and they could be on different levels. So anything can happen, and it's completely up to you. This guy can be looking down at this guy can be looking down at this guy, or maybe this guy's looking at a bug and he doesn't even notice that this guy down below is watching him and spying on him, and this guy down above is watching him. He's oblivious because he's got his eye on a bug. Or it can be anything you want, but it's really easily shown with the pupil. So this guy is going to be looking at a little insect that I'm going to draw here that he is hoping to eat for lunch. Right there. So he's not noticing anybody. And this guy's like, oh man, that guy's got a really good lunch. I want to see him. He's looking up, he's looking forward, he's looking down. But already there's kind of a story going on there. Here's another way. Where you position their body also tells a story. So say you have two chameleons facing each other. They maybe are having a confrontation. Maybe they're friends. Maybe they're happy to get together. Maybe they're fighting over this little cherry. These two back to back, did they just have a fight? Are they pouting? Or they could be looking forward as if they're leaving, or they could be looking back over their shoulders as if they're mad at each other and still keeping an eye on each other. You can decide. Didn't have a mouth yet. Make sense? There's all kinds of stories that come in mind when you start controlling their eyes. This is going to be my final paper, and I put my chameleons. This time I was careful not to draw the overlapping part there because I wasn't working with pencil. So here's my final chameleon, and I decided to have one above the other. And I think they're going to keep an eye on each other. I think they're pretty aware that each other are around. And there's two things I want you to think about when you are ready for your final. One is I didn't finish drawing the legs because I thought this is when I've decided where they're going to be. I decided the start of their story. And I'm going to have them being on a vine, so I did some stop and start drawing because I might want their little pinchers to kind of grab on. See how I did that? I'm going to bring it over there, and then I'm going to stop and draw that other part of the leg sticking up, so all of a sudden he's holding onto the vine or the branch, and then I'll stop and start. That I've taught you that kind of stuff before. So I'm going to do this one. I like to draw it like a little vine that comes down like a little swing sometimes. There. Then it goes over here. I know this is looking a little tricky the way I'm doing it, but if you don't do it, it's going to be okay too. See, I keep stopping my drawing because I don't want it to go over the top of the creature. That'll make my vine that way. If they're in the jungle, this is when you get really fancy. If they're in the jungle, they're going to need a lot of fancy flowers or other insects or big crazy leaves to hide behind. Or little flowers that you can make flowers that are kind of like that kind of flower. But also you could make here, I'm just going to draw it loose for right now. You can draw the kind of flower that's kind of like a bell. where you see some fun stuff sticking out the bottom. So be creative about the flowers and the plants that you put around it. And then, of course, be really creative about what you do with your chameleon pattern. Remember, when you go to make the pattern, you can make them realistic. You could even make them checkerboard. You can make them rainbow. You can make them polka dot. You can make them full of smiley faces, though that might be a little confusing. You can do anything, because the whole point of picking chameleons as an art project is that their coloring and their marking is so beautiful, but we're going to be creative and we're not going to be limited to what exists in nature. We're going to make up our own. Okay, there was a lot in there. So draw your chameleon, draw them to hang on to so they're not falling in the air. Draw some of the plants around them in the jungle, and then have a really creative time adding fancy details and patterning to them. Okay, have fun. I want to see how this turns out.